Today, we're continuing in our Via Voices programming, and we'll continue Tuesdays at 12 noon. And we're in a rotating schedule now where at the first Tuesday of each month, we're tilting our attention toward Via's work in global education. And so our guest today, Sol Garcia, is a longtime partner of Via International in the program of global education, and Elisa Sabatini, and a close friend and collaborator of Elisa Sabatini. So Elisa is going to lead us today, and I'll turn it over to her and let her introduce our guest. But will you join me with a quick round of applause as we welcome Sol Garcia to Via Voices. And last thing before I turn it over to Lisa, let's introduce ourselves in the chat room. I'll start if you'd like to follow, just who you are, where you're from. And then through the program, if you'd like to ask questions or comments or just ideas, feel free to use the chat room, and then we'll be sure to try to surface those comments before we close today at 1 o'clock. So thank you very much. And Elisa, Sol is all yours.
Well, I have to say that I am very excited to have Sol here with us today because we have shared a lot of experiences and probably similar lifestyles in our approach to working in Mexico. And I know, Sol, I know you're originally from Los Angeles.
Yes.
But at some moment you made a decision to move and get involved, and you are now calling here on Zoom with us from Mexico City. So I thought maybe you could share with us a little bit about how that happened. How did you go from Los Angeles to Mexico City?
Wow. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for the invitation. I love Via, you know that, and you are a dear friend of mine, someone that I truly admire. And thank you all for joining, and for anyone else who's going to watch this later, not live. So how did that journey happen? I'm from California. I was born in LA, and childhood was in Oxnard, and then went back to Cali when I was 20, and I moved here 5 years ago, and I really think that all of that goes way back to my mom. It goes back to my mom. She always instilled in our family to volunteer and to serve. And it was just part of the way we grew up as a family. So I was volunteering since I was very young, and it was just something very normal to do. And so, you know, eventually I chose a career. I graduated with a focus in sociology, and I was a social worker in Los Angeles for 12 years. And then, you know, I started traveling. I actually started traveling more hardcore, you could say, when I was 30, when I turned 30. And I mean, the more I traveled, the more I was curious. I didn't want to just be a tourist. I was very curious, well, how are other people in other parts of the world like solving their issues? You know, I had interviewed so many children that had been abused. And I felt fulfilled in my job, that I felt that I was able to make a difference. But I was really, really curious. And so as I traveled, I started seeing myself more as a global citizen. And I did this trip when I was 30. I left for 3 months, and I went to different places. And one of those places was Kenya. And I had an interesting experience there where I got really sick with typhoid, and I was bedridden, and I was given the wrong medication, and I was literally like withering away in a bed until I got to a point where I couldn't move anymore. It hurt to move, and I had to be carried out of the bedroom and into a taxi to a hospital. And that experience really changed my life, because it really hit me. The volunteer work that I had been doing there, my personal experience really hit me, like this issue of water, because I knew it had to do with the situation of lack of, you know, clean water, access to clean water and sanitation. As the years passed, after I came home, I continued to return to Kenya every year. And it wasn't, I always said it wasn't something I chose. It's something that chose me. It was something that I couldn't turn my back on. On that trip, I had gone to, I think it was like 20 countries, but that's where I had this experience that really, I never was the same after that. And so I started getting involved in these, water related projects, and I saw how water touches everything. If you don't have clean water, then you're more likely to get sick. And if you're part of, our many vulnerable populations in our world, then you're likely a young girl, a mother, a child who's the one that's in charge of or has the task of going to collect water. You're missing school. You're not able to be home with your kids or do, income generating activities. So it touches on, so many things. And for me, with the social worker mindset, it was like right up my alley, like very holistic, always thinking in the grand scheme of things. So as a Mexican American from California, of course, I'm always thinking of what's happening across the border. My family's from Guadalajara, and I grew up visiting them every year. But I mean, right across the border, we would go to Tijuana every year for me to go to the doctor. And it was always, very close relationship, but close and yet far. So I started researching, the whole water situation in Mexico. And eventually I made it to Mexico City to check out what Isla Urbana was doing, which is the place where I work at now. So I checked out Isla Urbana when they were first starting out. And I mean, we could totally go into that, but which I'm sure we will and we should. But once I saw what Isla was doing, I became the supporter from afar. And because I had been traveling and I had all these experiences, about 5 years ago, I was just coming to Mexico City to do some volunteer work was a normal thing for me. But I was offered a job and I was in a place where I said, yeah, actually that works for me. And I ended up staying.
Well, it seems like you're really staying now, if I understand right, because you have gotten married and I think you have a little pandemic baby, right?
I do.
Maybe you could tell us a bit about that experience.
I do. So of course, that wasn't part of the plan. I had already been living here close to a year and I was feeling very much at home here. I was actually, I mean, when I came here, when I was offered the job, I thought, okay, yeah, like I could live in Mexico City. And there was a lot of back and forth also. So I was able to go home every 3 months. And sometimes I would stay home for up to a month. And it fit really nicely. And then I didn't know that a year into it, I would meet who now is my husband. And, then we got married. And also, I mean, I had my baby a month after I turned 44. So it was also like the whole having a child and everything. It was a beautiful, pleasant surprise. And yes, she's 7 months now. So she was born in the middle of the pandemic, and that's a whole other online Zoom experience. But yeah, she's totally during a very challenging time. She's brings us smiles every single day, that child. Lack of sleep a lot, but so much joy. Yeah. And yeah, definitely. Once I got married, I had already seen myself living here, but once I got married, I also felt like, this is my home, and then you have with the baby and everything, like even more so. Then, I mean, that she is also Mexican American, and we'll see what she decides later. But yeah, our life is here.
And her name is Vida, for those of you. Her name is Light.
Vida. We had to name her Vida because of the time that she was born. We knew that she was going to bring us a lot of life, and oh my gosh, she lives up to her name for sure. Yeah.
Well, I think folks might be interested to hear about what were the differences and the similarities of living in Mexico City and Los Angeles. I mean,
wow. Time is the first one, I would say. It's different. Like, I meet up with a friend. Okay, I'll see you at 2. And, you have friends that sometimes are running late or what have you. But no, here it's just, it's no pressure. Like, we're going to meet at 2 around then or what have you. I remember when I first moved here, I'm that kind of person that when I'm hungry, I really need to eat. I can't wait. So I carry granola bars and stuff like that because I get, hangry. And when I first started living here, I was at the office and I thought it was lunchtime, and yeah, we're going out to lunch right now, but it would be an hour later, and I'm just, exhausted, like about to faint. I need some food. You kind of get used to those things, and this time is different, and there's I think positives and negatives that come with that, because also I think we're in the US, we are very like a little more rigid in some ways, and here that kind of flexibility, I think, kind of it gives way for you to have more meaningful conversations, I feel. Give space for like creativity, and also like that trust that it's going to get done. It gets done. It's just not in maybe such a rigid way, let's say. So that would be one of them. And also, as a Mexican American, I mean, no one ever knows where I'm from here. Just because I speak Spanish, and I think people will say, wow, you speak it so well, from being that you're born in the US, raised in the US. And I'm like, well, my family's from Guadalajara, but still they don't know where I'm from when they just figure I speak Spanish well, because in Guadalajara it's another accent. And then once you're growing up in LA and Oxnard, that's another accent. And then here in Mexico City is another accent. So I mean, those kind of things are interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. But definitely, I think the traveling helped me so much to adapt. Because I've always felt that when I travel, like the more different it is from my home environment, the better for me, because the more it causes me to stretch and grow, because I'm further and further away from my comfort zone. So it helped me a lot, a lot.
Well, I think you're at this point a shining star down there, and you look totally enlivened with Vida now in your life. Well, I know that for us, I mean, Via International, we've worked with you and with Isla now for I think 6 years, and of course our trips are intended to have a real immersion into the culture and traditions, but as well as understanding the issues that families deal with in this complex world that we live in. And so I was wondering a little bit about, because you were there pretty early on, about kind of the how and why that Isla Urbana came into existence. And I think many of our listeners might not know that much about the water issues in Mexico. So just kind of that panorama of the history and of Isla, and sort of what's happening in Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mexico has about 10 million people that don't have access to safe water. And here in Mexico City, it's a total case study, because we have so many people here. We have over 21 million people here. And originally, Mexico City, it was, Tenochtitlan, and that was back then, in the 1400s. Back then, I mean, it was built over a lake, right? But it was still an island, and the water was left intact, let's say. And so when the Spanish conquest happened, well, they continued to build, and because of the flooding, they drained out the lake. And that's caused really big problems. We have a very unsustainable management system for water here. We have, give or take, 70% of our water we overexploit from our aquifers. And also because of that history, we're sinking. So there are places that literally here in Mexico City, and outskirts, there are places that could sink up to, I think, I want to say almost like 12 inches. So in a year, which is insane. You don't see it like that in all places, but if you go to like the Zócalo, you will see that the churches are like this. Some of the streets, I mean, if you really pay attention. So we overexploit our aquifers, about 70% of the water that we get. And then the remainder, 30% or so, we pipe in from over 100 miles away. And that system has about 40% of leaks. So you're sending so much water and half of it is lost in leaks, almost half of it. And at the same time, we still have this issue of flooding. We have so much water because we have so much rain. I mean, it rains here more than in London. I mean, you can have, maybe it'll start, the rainy season could be like 5 months, and it'll start maybe in the evening, but you'll get 1 hour that's just really hard rain, a lot of rain. So it doesn't make sense to not take advantage of this gift that we have from the sky. You know, and rainwater harvesting is not the only solution, but it's definitely an essential part of the solution with this problem. So that's a problem with Mexico City, and we're, you know, one of the, you know, we're a mega city, like one of the top, I want to say in the top 5 or so mega cities in the world that has a crisis, water crisis. So in that sense, that's why I say, you know, we're such a case study. So Isla Urbana started in 2009. At this point, we've installed over 20,000 systems, rainwater harvesting systems, impacting over 121,000 people. Back then, it was started because we have two of the founders, Enrique Lomitz and Renata Fenton. You know, they did their thesis on this issue of rainwater harvesting, and they're both born in Mexico, and they went and did their studies abroad. And so they really wanted to design something that would make a difference in society. And so, you know, they came and did some research, and they started seeing this issue of water as they went into vulnerable communities, low-income communities. They saw this issue of water where low-income people were having to carry, and I mean, this is just in Mexico City. Of course, it happens in rural areas, but we have places in Mexico City even now that get their water by donkey. And so on the outskirts, peri-urban areas. And so, you know, they started talking to people, and they started seeing that, you know, they have to pay for water. They have to pay for these trucks to make it to their homes. They have to buy those like jugs of water, and being low income, they're actually paying more than people that have a lot of money. So people in Polanco pay less for water than people that are in Xochimilco, which is really crazy because that's the most expensive way of getting water, having it delivered to you that way. And that's because many of them are not connected to any kind of water network, or they get their water intermittently. And so as the population has grown, it's gone further and further into the mountains. There are, you know, informal homes out there as well. So those kind of issues are happening. So Enrique actually ended up moving into the neighborhood across the street from the very first beneficiary. At the same time, you have David Vargas and Jennifer White, who are also founders, and they were also studying this. And David is also from Mexico's families from Mexico, and wanted to come back and give back to his community, got connected to Enrique, crashes on Enrique's couch, and it's continued on that way since 2009. And so when the amazing thing about living in the community, this community is called the Cultura Maya, you know, you live across the street from the first beneficiary, and then you start installing with the neighbors. You're designing it, you're checking up on it, you're seeing like what's working, what's not working, how can you improve it, and it just becomes this living laboratory. And so I came to visit them when they were just 1 year into it, and I saw the process, and I was just blown away by these young individuals who were, you know, some of them were born here, raised here, some of them were born here, raised in the US, and came back. And I just thought, it was beautiful, and they were like so grassroots, just doing it, you know, with a little truck and the PVC piping and just figuring it out. But it was cool. And I went across the street at that time, 1 year in. I mean, I was writing a blog, taking pictures on, you know, what's happening. I'm trying to see what's happening in Mexico. And this woman is like, my life has changed. You know, I mean, I have my cistern now, and now I'm collecting the water, and it's perfectly safe. And so as time passed, I mean, at that time they were installing like 2 a month, and now we're at the numbers that I mentioned. So that's how I got started. And what I've mentioned about Mexico City and Mexico is like why it's so important. I mean, Isla Urbana, although our offices are in Coyoacán, a lot of the work has been in Mexico City. We have really worked throughout the country, and we have work with indigenous communities, ongoing work that's been in existence since we started. Our rural systems will give you water. I mean, they live off of that water sometimes up to a year, the entire year. I've been with the Huicholes and have seen how, I mean, that's the only water they live off. They can drink it. It's perfectly safe. So up to a year. And then in urban areas, it's anywhere from 5 to 8 months of the year. So I mean, it's a beautiful cause. It's a beautiful project. And it really is very inspiring. And I think that the way they got started, that spirit lives on till now. I mean, they're very creative. They're very innovative. They're very gung-ho. But of course, now they have the experience of these years and these thousands of installations and all the processes that they've had to go through. And it's something that I'm very proud of being a part of.
I think that actually I was very honored last year to be invited to be on the board of directors of Isla Urbana USA. So I'm serving in that role and have really appreciated that. And I know that this past year has been certainly difficult for visits and even difficult for doing installations and the community-based work. But I thought, as I know that there is hot off the press, some information about the work during the pandemic. I thought maybe you could share some of that with us.
Yeah, definitely. And like you mentioned, you're on the board of Isla Urbana USA. So basically we have a presence in the US as a nonprofit. And then in Mexico, we're a nonprofit and also a social enterprise. So the nonprofit in the US supports solely the work of the nonprofit in Mexico, and I oversee the one in the US. So yeah, we have an annual report that I mean, we won't go through all of it, but I'll share some of it with you. Let's see, hopefully I'll do my screen share okay here. Let me know if it works okay. Can you see it okay? Yes? Awesome.
Yes.
Okay. So we put this together for our supporters and we send it to them individually every year. This is our thank you. Some pictures of, where we install. The bottom right hand is actually our summer program, which is we host students from the US here, started with high school students and now high school students with university mentors, which of course, because of COVID, we had to pause last year, but we're doing it virtually, continuing virtually. So
maybe could you go back one or maybe here, somewhere sort of explain the system, I mean, just a little bit about what are those blue things?
Yes, of course. So the tlaloque is really the most important part of the system. That's the first flush. And it's been designed, many times, we're always looking to improve it, always looking to make it not just durable, but also, cost efficient, easy to work. So basically that blue thing, see on the bottom left, that's what it used to look like before. Actually, no, that's what it looks like now. These are the larger ones. And then you have the one on the top left, those are more in rural settings because they're smaller homes. The bottom left, they're larger because they're installed in larger homes or in schools. So you have a lot of ceiling there, roof. So basically, I mean, you have to just put in your gutters in the home, and then it gets channeled down through the piping, through the tlaloque. So the first, let's say 15 minutes or so of rain, which is your most contaminated, acidic, what have you, it goes in the tlaloque. And that will give you, I think it's like 70% of the dirtiest water is taken care of right there with that first flush. It goes also through a leaf filter. So if you have rocks or any kind of, leaves or anything that falls, it also gets rid of that. And then it gets channeled into a cistern in the bottom right. You'll see one type of cistern. Often they're like maybe anywhere from 2,500 liters, 5,000 liters. In rural areas, they'll go up to 17 or more thousand liters. That's why they can live off of them for so long, because I mean, they have to be able to have that water there. And, you know, it's closed off in a way where, you know, you don't have insects and things like that getting in there. As the water is channeled into the cistern, it goes in through a calm inlet. So that way it doesn't, as it go in, it doesn't splash around, and any kind of sediments or anything like that are still at the bottom. And then it takes the water from the top as it exits. So it'll go through some other filters. And then, you know, in rural areas where you don't have some, like in the city, I mean, you can't then just drink that water. You still need that last filter, like the ones that we use in the US. We have these kind of, maybe like a Brita or something like that. We have eco filters and things like that that we also have the communities use for them to drink it. But in rural areas, it is clean enough in many rural areas where they can just drink it without that last filter, because you don't have that kind of contamination. Again, and like you see him standing on the roof, you know, it's important that the roof is clean, that a lot of times people will keep their dogs and things up there. It cannot be a storage place. You cannot keep any pets up there. You should not have like a tree covering the whole roof. You just have it filled with leaves and birds and stuff like that. So it just needs to be very clean. Yeah, and I mean, and that's how it works. It's not, I mean, we didn't in any way invent rainwater harvesting. It's been around forever, but it's just trying to really put it into practice and letting people know that it is safe. It is safe, and you can use it, and it's ecological, and it's beautiful. So, I mean, in the US, we're still considered like relatively small when you see that fundraising, but really our work for last year helped bring clean water to over 10,000 people. So everything that we do in the US makes a big difference. I mean, whenever I look at those numbers, 10,000 people, I mean, that's what counts to me, especially coming from that social worker background, you know? I'm looking at how this impacts lives, and each one is important. So we do schools, we install in urban homes, we install in rural homes. We have hand washing stations. Although it says 4 hand washing stations, that's because we started to install the bulk of them at the end of December for last year. We started a wash program last year, which is you know, for water and sanitation. So we have an Escuelas de Lluvia program, which is, I love it. I love Escuelas de Lluvia. The teachers that came in 2019 saw that. So basically we install systems at schools, but those schools also have environmental education. It's not just an installation. It's never just an installation. There's always a conversation. There's always a relationship that needs to happen first with the community. And they need to want it. It can't just say, oh, hey, we're installing this at the school as a gift. Not at all. Like, you have to take ownership of it. We want to make sure, you know, that it's something that you know how to use, you want to use, and that you understand the importance of how to use it and why it's there, obviously. So we do the environmental education at all of our schools. So there's, you know, many visits by us to the school, and not just the evaluation of the need and what have you, but there's a relationship that starts there. We have an inauguration of the system. The kids learn how it is used. Sometimes they're involved in, you know, the upkeep of it. And then we have also started the wash programs last year, where we have, you can see right there under the picture of the kids, that's a hand washing station. So now we have 116 in this next couple months, from starting at the end of last year, that we're going to have schools and hand washing stations. So even though that says 4, that was in December. So yeah, 70 systems on the US end. You know, with COVID, we did a lot more virtual campaigns. As you know, all nonprofits had to continue the work. I mean, COVID just heightened our work, that much more important, and you'll see why. But we did, you know, the Water Week, as you mentioned. We did the Gift Rain campaign, where we fundraised for 15 systems. And if we have time, I'll try and show like a little video on that. And yeah, those are some of the pictures of the installations and the homes. The gift ring campaign was urban homes. Water Week, here we go. Water Week, we had our silent auction. I mean, we had never really done anything like this online before. But again, our volunteers, they're amazing. We had students that kicked it off with a 5K. We had a week of events. We had a 5K event. We had a cooking class. We had salsa dancing. We did a lot of fun stuff. We also had a global and local talk. We had a party at the end with performances. I mean, it was our first time doing something like that online, and I was so excited to see how well it all went. People from all over the US really helped. Yeah, some more of the pictures of that. The summer program that I mentioned, the students that come here yearly, we did a virtual, we had a virtual events committee, and we continue with having our meetings. It's important for us, and this is one of the things that really attracted me as someone from California, that Isla doors are open. So we have students from all over the world. We have many, many from the US, but we have students from all over the world that come and knock on our door randomly and say, hey, I heard about you guys, and can we talk? And yes, you know, set up in the corner. We'll meet in a couple hours. And, you know, it's not always as easy to just take them on that way, but we always want to have this, like, you're very welcome to contact us. Our doors are open. So long as it can be done, you know, we can organize it well. Right now with COVID, it gets a little complicated. Yeah, we want you to be a part of this. We want to learn from you. We want you to learn from us. Let's share the knowledge. And also, you know, with our students and people that help us fundraise in the US, it's important that we're building bridges. Like for us, it's connecting with water activists, connecting with young minds, connecting with people that have been in this for a long time, continue to build the bridge between here and the US as to the work that's happening. And that also is a win-win situation because our communities also benefit from it because we're able to install more systems with those relationships. So these are the lavamanos, the hand washing stations and wash program. And yeah, I mean, just a little bit on the COVID, you know, situation. I mean, we're bottom line here. I mean, you could look at this. I mean, one of these stats is that 1/4 of public schools don't have access to clean water. That's why it's so important with the schools. You know, the cool thing about installing at schools too is that then the students go home and they take that knowledge to the family and the experience to the family. And also sometimes depending on how big the school is, how the system's going, some of the families can also use that water as well in the community. But really here with COVID, I mean, what are we all being asked to do from the beginning? We're going into a year. This is wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. How do you maintain good hygiene when you already don't have access to clean water? Mm-hmm. So that's when, you know, when COVID first started, that's when we really were like, wow, this is just going to become so difficult, so much more difficult. But like this report actually gives me so much hope because it just shows that people were, I mean, we were still able to accomplish things, even though we had to do so much of it online and not able to see people in person. We've continued to go out into communities after we regrouped, after we planned, after we had to put new practices in place to stay safe and to keep our community members safe. We hate that we can't do things like before, you know, literally the families will invite you into their homes, say, come have dinner with me, and or thank you so much, come on in and let's have some coffee. And we don't have the freedom to do things like that in the way that we used to in the past, and we really just like that. But we found ways to do this, continue on, you know, wearing our masks, and we even tell our workers, like, please do not touch your keys or anything like that while you're out there. Like, I mean, it's been challenging, but we've continued, and that makes me super happy. And this is Isla Urbana's work on the Mexico end. 600 systems were installed last year in spite of COVID. You know, we did a lot more partnerships, 23 organizations. We started the WASH program. We won the award. We've continued with schools. So in spite of COVID, we were able to do this. And I think, you know, there's so much more to do. And I mentioned these numbers in the beginning, you know, over 121,000 individuals impacted since 2009. I'm sure that number is going to jump up a lot in these next 2 months as we finish these schools. So yeah, I'll stop the share now. There we go. So it has not been easy. I don't think it's been easy for any nonprofit, for any cause, but we pushed through. We pushed through in spite of COVID.
Well, one of the things I thought I might share just as a couple of stories, because you're talking about the impact at the community level, and then there's also the impact that happens with visitors, which is like another whole arena of impact. And I wanted to tell about this one young man. He was from, actually, I think truly he was from Mexicali, but he insisted that he was from Calexico here in California. And he was on one of our trips. And, you know, we flew down to Mexico City. We had an amazing cultural and kind of touristic experience in the center of Mexico City. I remember at the first meal, he said, "Are we going to eat Mexican food the whole time we're here?" And I was kind of like, well, we're in Mexico. So yes, we are going to eat Mexican food. Mm-hmm. At any rate, through the week, I noticed that he was, you know, I also noticed he was fluent in Spanish. And I noticed when we were in the community with Isla Urbana, that he was very sort of attached to the technicians. He was over talking to them, asking them all these questions and, you know, all these things about how it worked and how the community was. And the point is that at the end of the week, he said, well, this was a lot of firsts for me. This is a 25-year-old young man. Mm-hmm. This is a lot of firsts for me. It's the first time I was ever in an airplane. Wow. It's the first time I ever climbed a pyramid. It's the first time I ever went in a cave, because we also did that. He said, it's the first time I ever understood anything about sustainable issues. And he said, it's the first time I'm proud to be Mexican. Wow. So, you know, I think that those kinds of impacts on people that visit these sustainable programs is so important for our young people, our Mexican American students, anyone who wants to kind of open and grow who they are as people. Yeah. And I know that our last trip with you, which was now over a year ago in 2019, we had the joy of I actually was accompanied by our board chair, Phil Hadley, and we were in with 50 teachers all from North Carolina. And some very similar experiences. These were a lot of teachers who'd won Teachers of the Year for their county. I think in that group, there were 4 or 5 who had never had never flown, and several more than that had to get a passport to go on this trip. So for them, it was really a hugely expanding experience. But I thought maybe you could describe a little bit about the experience we had at the school, at the Escuela de Lluvia, because I think that was one of the most impactful moments that we had on that trip. Yeah.
Well, I definitely, and I want to touch on like the importance of VIA's work, you know, and what we do too, because, you know, just the student that you were talking about, I've seen that a lot with our summer program, like other things like that, like when they first show up, they're like, oh, you know, just things that they're nervous about or what have you. And that are just, it's different cultural experiences that you're having. Again, even if your family is from Mexico, right? And you speak the language, there's just a lot of things that you experience once you come here. But for me, honestly, like even just hearing you speak about that, I get really moved. It's what inspires me and like motivates me. One of the things that motivates me the most is that whole thing of building this bridge and having people have these experiences it's so important, having access to this kind of information and experience. And yeah, and I love so much when you bring your groups over, because to me, it's like, oh, part of home is coming here, because both are home to me now. And the teachers were amazing. They all just came with the best attitude. So what happens is oftentimes we have groups that fundraise for a system, and we often those systems are schools. And since they were teachers, it made sense that they would fund a school. So, but this was a school in Xochimilco, and everything from the moment that they arrived and figuring out the parking situation. But when those teachers walked into that school, I mean, they always do a ceremony and of gratitude or something, but I did not know it was going to be that big. I mean, you would have thought that the whole parade in the town came out for the teachers, and it was so beautiful. As they walked in, there were lines of people, parents, teachers, students, with signs, welcome and thank you. And the students did, I don't know how many beautiful dance numbers. You saw the mural on the wall. We do a lot of artwork with the environmental education program with Escuelas de Lluvia. And so there was a beautiful mural on the wall. And you'll see that often in our schools and in the neighborhoods that talk kind of like the cycle of water and whether it's rainwater harvesting or what have you. And yeah, I mean, they were greeted with just like beautiful presentations, beautiful dance numbers, speeches by the principal, by teachers, by specific students. The teachers also gave a water filter to the principal, presented the principal that he could have there at the office. And then we broke out we went into a classroom, and my couple of colleagues and I, we like did a workshop with the teachers and talked about the program. We showed them the system along with some students, and they explained to the teachers how it worked. During that day, I mean, it was a beautiful day. It was sunny, it was gorgeous, and typical as it is when it rains here. All of a sudden, it's beautiful, it's sunny, and then all of a sudden it'll start raining. And so we're in the classroom doing these activities. Some of them were like arts-based activities, but really they were activities to get them thinking about like what this really means, what their efforts, their fundraising efforts, the fact that they're there, what this means to the families. We had students come into the classroom and tell them personally what it used to be like before, what it is like now. And also when you go and travel into another country, I always like to talk a lot, go into a space and time where we talk about like, this is not a savior thing. This is not us coming and saving people from anything. Water is a human right. And if we're able to, which we all are in some way, like do something to help provide that to someone else, and that we're always coming into these spaces with not a teacher mentality, but a student mentality. And we had conversations about that, like what I still learn every single day, what I can learn from the teachers on that day, what they can learn from this experience. And as we were there, it started raining. So, and it was beautiful because it was raining and the windows, the curtain was open and you could see the system out the curtain. And it's just like, it couldn't have been any more perfect. And it was just a beautiful time. I loved being with them. I loved their energy. They were very inquisitive. I mean, there's so many different backgrounds. I mean, these teachers were amazing. And I mean, that was one of the best days ever, really.
Well, I attended their reflection gathering months later in October of 2019 in North Carolina. And the teachers were still talking quite specifically about that and what they had shared in their classrooms back in North Carolina about the issue of water. And some of them had taken on water as a theme in their classes. And so I think these are the ripple effects of these kinds of experiences. I am noticing we have some economists in the room, and there are some
I saw some of the questions.
Yeah,
you get to see them
about the kind of the cost of the systems, and then how the various structuring of the projects work.
Yeah, I'm seeing the question about the cost. So the cost varies. It depends. In an urban setting, if a home already has a cistern, then it's much cheaper. We're talking about maybe 700 or so. If it has a cistern, the cistern is the most expensive part. And there are many homes that come with that type of infrastructure, or they build their homes with a cistern. Um, without a cistern, we're talking about more like $1,500 in the urban setting. When we're going into, and also hand washing stations, also, no, I'm sorry, those are more. When we go into a rural, then we're looking at, those systems are $2,500 because they have those huge cisterns.
Mhm.
And then the hand washing stations also cost about $2,400. And then we have schools. Schools are most expensive when you look at everything, because you end up installing more than one system, more than one cistern, and schools are anywhere from like 7,000 and up. And it depends on how big the school is, because you have, more space, more roof surface. So there's just more work, and how many floors it is. If it's a small school, then we're looking at something closer to 6,000. But if it's a larger school, then we're looking at going something more closer to 8,000. We try and give the general prices, but I mean that's how it is. And with the peso changing, as far as how they get paid for, so it varies. Our work in the U.S. fundraises strictly for these systems. At times, there are people who say, you know what, what do you have going on? And they will say, I would like to give money specifically for you to continue to work on the design aspect or what have you, which we're always happy to, because you know how that is for nonprofits. You have to find other ways, now I'm thinking only in Spanish, becas, and what have you. So, but it also gets funded through grants. There it is, becas, grants, that we're writing. We have partnerships, so sometimes the other partner will have a portion and we have a portion, and together we could do more. Yeah, we sometimes when we win these prizes, these international prizes, they come with finances. And definitely also municipalities here, well, they're given a specific amount of money. And oftentimes that we're always hopeful for, well, they're going to invest in infrastructure to improve their communities. And they say, you know what, let's contact Isla Urbana, and they will hire us to do those kind of projects. So it gets funded in that way. It says, do the communities fund the systems themselves? No, unless, it goes in just through the social enterprise side, and someone like a private school or someone that has some funds say, or once in a while we will get people say, hey, we got our parents together and we sold baked goods or whatever, and we have these many pesos. And they'll say, okay, great. And we always want them to be vested in it. So if they're not giving like a small percentage, they will help sometimes with the manual labor.
Well, one of the things I know that we were discussing, and we've had some conversations with the founders and with some other entities in Mexico City, but is the possibility of doing a similar to microcredit program, where families could secure a loan that would be paid over time, and working with certain capital systems. We've had, I think, initial conversations with a bank that I used to work with, Compartamos, and we're looking at those possibilities, because the need is certainly much greater than we can fundraise with, at least under current situations. We have
started, we've done a lot of research on that, and we have started. It's slow, not to the point where it's in the annual report yet, but we are starting the microfinancing area of it.
And I think there were some, just so people understand this piece of programming in Mexico, it happens here too. I don't want to cast aspersions at the Mexican government, but there were certain promises made, my understanding, for a number of systems, and then the administration changed. I believe that's one of the issues with the changing governments, which I mean happens in every country, but I think there was more energy and interest with the former administration in Mexico to fund systems.
Well, I think the current administration, well, I don't want to say Mexico, I want to say more Mexico City. So
Mhm.
yeah, so in Mexico City, she has put in a lot of interest in rainwater harvesting. There's a process when the mayor of Mexico City came in a few years ago. She's very, very much interested in that, and we were able to get that licitación. We were able to get that contract and we installed 10,000 systems in 1 year, which
Yeah.
at that point we had installed 10,000 in almost 10 years. So we jumped. I mean, that really was a game changer. But then, every year they have to go through the process again. And, you may have, depends on how the process goes and someone else. We were grateful that we got that we won that contract, because we really have the experience and had the experience to pull off something like that the very first year in the best way possible. We're really, really proud of that. Out of that year, we put out a manual. If anyone's interested, we also published a manual on rainwater harvesting. I mean, it was a beautiful job. I couldn't be any more prouder. Then when the following year came, they had to go through the process again, and we weren't included. And it is what it is,
Yeah.
But we continue because it's a need. It's such a high need, and we're always hopeful that it's going to be done well and professionally, and by people who have the experience and expertise, because you can't play around with it, so many people.
So thanks so much for joining us. I do want to just give is there one last question before we close things up? Anybody want to shout out a question? I think we've addressed the main issues that were raised in the chat room. Anybody like to? Yes, please, Janet.
Hi. I just wanted to say how happy I am to hear from you, Sol, and to learn about how this kind of collaboration with VIA has advanced. And it's hard to believe it's been 6 years. I know Renata Fenton, and I'm very close to her and her family. And I think I introduced Elisa to Isla, but I'd kind of forgotten when that was and the history behind that. But I remembered Renata talking about having groups go to communities and help install these systems, and I thought, I wonder if some of those VIA groups could go. So that, I guess that's how it got started. And anyway, it's just a beautiful story. And I've been tracking the changes of the organization over the years, and they're just, I think you're right. They really kept the grassroots, like the basic spirit intact, despite all kinds of offers, in the commercial space, to sell their technology, and so that they could make money from it, and they refused. So it's really a beautiful story. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet, because I saw your name when it first popped up, the people that were coming in. I said, oh, okay, I know Janet. So I appreciate you so much. We appreciate people like you who've been longtime supporters, and really, you really get welcome. The need, but also just the spirit of what we do. So thank you so much.
Well, I hope to visit myself.
Please.
I do think too that just to say how these things happen. I mean, Jeanette did introduce me to Renata, and on a trip to Mexico City, where I was actually there, Los Niños, our partner in Mexico, was receiving a prize for some of our educational work with women. And we had a few extra moments or time, and we met with Renata, and really from a simple, would you be interested to have some of our groups come and work with you? She was like, by all means, we would love to receive you. So I think, through relationships is how a lot of these things that can do wonderful work in the world happen. So
Well, thank you again, and will you all join me with a round of applause as we thank Sol for joining us.
Thank
and
you.
Wish you well with your family and getting some sleep with your
Thank you.
We'll hope, many of us I know in the room are hoping to have Central Mexico on our minds, and hope to have it on our maps someday soon. So We'll look
Thank
forward to
you.
seeing you in person.
You all can reach me also at sol, S-O-L, at islaurbana.org. And then our website, islaurbana.org/English, if you want to look at
Good.
the English version. Yeah.
And
thank
I will send a follow-up email as was requested with a link to the website and also to we found the report that you shared, Sol. So we'll send that out to this list of Via Voices enthusiasts. Next week, I'm going to ask Rigo Reyes to just say a word about our program for next week before we go.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Sol, for this experience. And I just want to make this observation that this is a true example of a difference as far as community development is concerned, from a short-term to a long-term type of approach of working with communities at the grassroots. And I really admire that particular approach. That's something that here at VIA is something that we really strive for. And thank you. For next week, I've invited Alberto Pulido. He's one of our partners with VIA. There's actually a number of different partners. There's the Chicano Park Steering Committee, the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center, of course, VIA International, and USD, who work with this project that is known as the Turning Wheel. And what it is an educational bus that goes around to different communities, low-income communities, and basically try to serve the students and some of these communities. So Alberto's going to be sharing some of that experience with us next week.
Thanks so much for joining us. Via Voices, we're here Tuesdays at noon. You know where to find us. If you're not on the regular mail list and want to be, just let me know and I'll add you con gusto. So for now, we'll just say one more thank you to Sol. Thank you, Elisa, for leading our conversation.
Gracias.
And we'll see you next time on Via Voices. Have a great day.
Yes.
Bye.
Gracias, Sol.
Adiós, gracias.
Ajá.